So this is the year 2000. This year for me, in terms of whales, started in January and it's going to go through December. It's not just the whale watch season. So last fall, Lisa, Brian, and Judith were interns, and we all went to the Marine Mammal Conference in Hawaii in December. And then we met again in January out in San Diego on the Odyssey. That was Ocean Alliance's research vessel. And we had to pay our dues in order to go be part of the expedition. So we got out there I was the last one to arrive mid-January. We spent about 2 months helping to get the boat ready, learning all kinds of new skills, especially for me. But then on March 17th, we left San Diego to head to the Galapagos. And it was about a 15-day, 16-day passage. And it was absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. This is a picture of Darwin Island, which is the first island that we approached after being at sea for, I think it was like 9 days, having left Cabo. And then these are a couple of the animals that we saw. I woke everybody up at 6 in the morning one morning screaming, hammerhead shark. We had sperm whales and we had sea turtles. We had Rizzo's dolphins and bottlenose dolphins and melon-headed whales, just so many different species. Once we got down into the main Galapagos Islands, we also crossed the equator, and just like many boats, we went from polywogs to shellbacks and had a celebration and everything. I tried to get somebody to shave my head. I said I would, but nobody would. So I shaved a whale tail on the back of my head, or actually Jen and Rebecca did. And then once we got to the Galapagos, we stayed for about a week and got to see just some of the amazing animals. It's such an incredible place. So I said goodbye to these guys when we were down in the Galapagos. It was quite an amazing 6 months that we had spent together. And then 2 days later, I was back in Massachusetts and getting ready to start whale watch season. So huge props to Lisa Ruffino for finding the picture of the hurricane. Is the only picture I have seen of this boat. This is the one that we had in 1999 and 2000. It went about 14 knots. It had carpeting and mirrors all over the inside. If you ever went whale watching those years, I'm sure you remember that. It was definitely an interesting boat. So I'm going to give a quick rundown of the season and then a few of the other highlights of things that we had that year. So we started out, in general, there were less whales around this year, just throughout the entire season. But we started out with Sickle and her calf, and Nile and her calf, who ended up being named Aswan, who's around quite a bit. But this is such a cool picture of this is Nile actually kelping. So when they play with the seaweed that comes from, usually after storms, there'll be seaweed floating around, but this is Nile playing with the seaweed. We also had Reflection in her calf, which for me was really cool because it was the first whale that had been named at a naming party that I was at that I saw come back with a calf. And so that was just a really cool treat for me. Compass was out there, which was awesome because the year before, Compass had been seen entangled in fishing gear. And whenever they're seen late in the season and then not seen again, you know, we always worry about them. And so she showed up free of gear, which was super exciting for us to see. Things kind of slowed down as they often do with the month of June. We were watching a lot of fin whales. And then the humpbacks kind of slowly started trickling in. So we started with Chimney and Echo. Those were two of the whales that we saw quite a bit during the initial part of the year. A couple other whales that were around that I haven't mentioned so far. Seal was out there, and I love this name. If you look at the right-hand side, he's named after the white part. It looks like an elephant seal with a big nose. You see the flipper on the side too. We had a whale named Anvil. This is one of my favorite pictures that I've taken because her tailstock is so high out. And Sirius. So that was another whale that common visitor during those times, and Virgule. And in general, we were kind of anywhere between 12 miles out, which is the northwest corner, and the BE buoy, which was about 25 miles out, which on a boat going 14 knots takes a while to get there. Now, I had two really cool sightings that year that I so distinctly remember, but I couldn't remember which year, and I realized that they were this year. So this one day, we had Pele, Aztec, Falcon, and an unknown next to the boat, and it was it was so gorgeous. And then this happened.
Yesterday, I'm showing you that other whale. I haven't gotten a great look at its tail yet. But they've also been with another whale.
Oh my God!
It was so amazing. A passenger happened to get it on film and gave it to me. And so I dug around in my basement and was able to digitize this video for this Throwback Thursday. And then we had this other amazing day with Scylla and her calf. So Scylla is a very common visitor, and this is her calf that was kelping. But it was this day where, and I've actually had multiple years where this has happened with Scylla. It's like the mom is teaching the calf how to do everything that becomes an important behavior as they become adults. But for the calves, it's like practicing. So then we ended up up at Jeffrey's Ledge for a little while this summer. And we had Porcupine, who's a whale that I haven't seen recently, and Badge. And both of these whales have rake marks from where they've been attacked by a killer whale. I just think Badge has the coolest tail. We also had Pinball and a calf that summer, but I just didn't have any good pictures of Pinball, believe it or not, because she's a super high fluker. So, and then in the fall, things kind of picked up a little bit. In the summer, we were seeing like 2 to 6 whales a trip, something like that. But in the fall, it was more like 10 to 15 whales a trip. We saw pilot whales about 6 different times that fall. We had a right whale, which was really cool. It was skim feeding. We hadn't seen a right whale in about 3 years. Lisa got this awesome picture of a breaching minke whale. We don't get to see them that often, and especially when their entire body is out of the water like this. We also had Valley and calf, and I was actually looking through my journals, and I read about the calf with a funny looking tail, and I didn't remember it, but as I went through my pictures, I found these pictures. Look at this tail. And Jill's face just says it, like, what's wrong? So I don't know if it was entangled in fishing gear and its tail became really deformed, but it certainly, I'm sure it didn't survive. I don't think I've ever seen it again. But that was a very sad animal to see that summer. And then we also had, just the usual regulars. We had white-sided dolphins, ocean sunfish. We saw a blimp one day out there. We had Cajun doing her usual antics. And one of the last trips of the season, I remember going out there, and I totally fudged this picture. This was not an actual picture I took, but it's what I remember in my mind. We call it a picket fence. So overnight, like 40 whales had moved into the area, and we went out, and it was just like blow after blow after blow after blow. I was so bummed that this season wrapped up because all those whales must have been out there pigging out right before the season ended. So the main thing that happened too, one of the big things in the summer of 2000 was tall ships. And I had heard about lots of stories about tall ships, but it was when all the big vessels come into Boston. And so we took the week off of whale watching basically and did tall ship trips. So we had 2 boats, 2 crews, working 18-hour days. I think I did 17 tours of the tall ships that week. Made all these flashcards about all the different boats and that sort of thing. It was truly, the parade of sail that day was an incredible day. It was just beautiful and calm. And all these big ships came by. This is the Krusenstern. This one is the Esmeralda from Chile. This is the Guayas from Ecuador, and a couple other ones, the JFK, the big aircraft carrier. I remember that they had pallets of money on the boats, but it was a very long week. And it was a very trying week. And there are many, many stories from tall ships about basketball and finding people in bushes and our eating ramen noodles and hot dogs until we finally said, enough, we cannot eat this anymore. And we got these crazy wraps and soups from some place that Jimmy found because he's got our backs, but you can see the crew went a little batty. If anybody remembers this, on Saturday night of the tall ships, we had this, we still call it the Hell Cruise because the winds had picked up. I remember being on the whale watch that morning, way down south, and we were coming back and the seas just got worse and worse and worse. We canceled the afternoon trip and had an awful ride down to Boston for this big fireworks show Saturday night and an awful ride home. We ended up pulling into Salem at 12:30 at night, getting a few people off the boat. And then the skies opened up and we had, 150 people we had to bus back to Boston. I think we got back at about 5 a.m. that night. Did not work the morning trip, but went out Sunday. There was still a really big swell and it was pea soup fog. And this was a day when all the Class A vessels were leaving. So those are the really big ones and they were all under full sail. But it was crazy because we only had a couple 100 feet of visibility. And so you would hear this foghorn and you'd know the boat was right there, but you couldn't see it. And then you would see this full rig ship emerge out of the fog. It was a pretty intense day. So we kind of bailed on the end of it and went back into the Gloucester Harbor and saw a few of the tall ships that were there. Lots more stories, but not really appropriate for right now. We had such a fun crew that summer. Here's just a couple of the pictures of some of the interns and volunteers. Back in those days, we used to have captain's parties at the end of the season where we'd all get gussied up and go get together. And this last picture, if you guys know me now, you know that I started dating my husband that year. He worked on the whale watch boat as well. And so I found this picture from that summer that we were both working together 21 years ago. So the year ended. Remember, I said it goes through December. I went to a conference that fall, and I remember, I think it was December 2nd. I get a call from Nick. You got to come down to the breakwater. There's a whale in the harbor. And this little whale, Inland, who ended up being named Inland, was about a 2-year-old and had been in the Gloucester Harbor and the Beverly Harbor, Salem Harbor most of the fall. She'd been seen feeding a couple different times, but she was right off the breakwater, like in front of the fisherman statue. It was so cool. Fortunately, she left Gloucester Harbor just fine, but ended up off the coast of Virginia later that year, washed up in fishing gear. And so her skeleton was in the Whale Center of New England. So if you ever saw that at Captain Bill's, that was this little whale that we got to see in December of 2000 in the Gloucester Harbor. So that was 2000. Lots and lots of memories from that year. So I hope you enjoyed it.